Hello everyone, in today's video I'm going to be making a super spam build for Void Warlock specifically, using two exotics that people have mostly forgotten about. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So starting off with the first exotic, it is going to be Wavesplitter. There's a multitude of reasons for picking this. The main reason is obviously going to be its exotic trait, Supercharged Battery, which reads, collecting an orb of power grants a period of maximum power that starts with an automatic reload. Sustained fire in this mode suppresses targets. To sort of explain what this actually does, whenever you gain a orb of power, you are getting a 68.7% damage buff to the exotic, as well as the ability to suppress enemies. Now, this exotic is only worth using in this mode for obvious reasons, so unless you have a steady stream of orbs, this exotic is not exactly the best. However, the Catalyst, which is Attrition Orbs and Detonator Beam, does help with that, as well as the fact that a armor set bonus that was introduced in the Monument of Triumph update synergizes very well. Going over to the exotic armor piece that we're going to be pairing with it, Mantle of Battle Harmony. Long story short, you get kills with Wavesplitter, it gives you bonus super energy. Whenever you use your super, you gain a buff called Harmonic Munitions, as well as 4 times surges for all elemental weapons. And whenever you get kills while your super is full, it's going to give you 4x surges of the element that matches your super, which in this case it's going to be Wavesplitter. To explain what Harmonic Munitions does, after casting your super, you gain 15 seconds of the buff to allow Wavesplitter to detonate targets it shoots, effectively giving it another version of Detonator Beam that also works with Detonator Beam, so it is very good for ad clear. To go over the super that we're going to be using with this, I have opted for Vortex Nova as one, you don't really use it all that often, and second, in regards to the other options, Nova Warp is definitely more of a fun choice, though it's not exactly the best, I will admit that. And I think Cataclysm is going to just be better on Prismatic instead of here, as well as being paired with Soul of Dar Ahamkara. Not to mention the fact that Vortex Nova also has the added bonus of pulling enemies into the actual vortex, which will make killing groups of enemies using Wavesplitter much easier, allowing us to loop back to our next super a lot quicker. For the class ability, I have opted to go for Empowering Rift, as this will give us a 20% damage increase, more ability regen, and 15% better ammo generation, which will help Wavesplitter be treated as a primary. The grenade is personal preference. I just opt for Vortex Grenade, as I find it the most consistent. Our first aspect is going to be Feed the Void, which is Devour. I don't really need to tell you why that's good. And our next aspect is going to be Child of the Old Gods. Now when paired with Empowering Rift, instead of giving you ability regen, it's going to give us healing, which is going to be very needed in the higher end content. Enemies that are tethered by Child of the Old Gods, otherwise known as Void Soul, are going to be weakened, which will synergize with multiple artifact mods that we have. And whenever we kill enemies that are tethered by Void Soul, it is going to give us class ability energy, allowing us to loop to our next rift a little bit better. For fragments, I have opted for Echo of Harvest, as this is yet another way to generate orbs. Reprisal for a bit more super energy whenever we're surrounded. I believe it's around 1 to 2%, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it does add up when we stack every region buff that we have. Echo of Expulsion, this is definitely more of a stat bump than anything. The explosions don't really do a whole lot, I'll admit, but I like them, so I'm going to use it. However, if you want to swap this out for something more useful, like Echo of Remnants, you can do that. Or if you want plus 10 weapons and plus 10 super, you can go Echo of Dilation. You can even go Echo of Undermining to have our Vortex Grenade weaken, though I personally don't really think it's needed. Our next fragment is going to be Echo of Persistence, as this will allow us to have a longer lasting Devour. And our final fragment is Echo of Vigilance, for when we get super weak and we don't have Devour active, this will give us a Void Overshield, and this will just help us stay in the fight for a fair bit longer. To go over the two things that really make this build shine, the armor set bonus is going to be Atheon's Memory. Long story short, this is basically a much better version of attrition orbs. Whenever you have a subclass buff like Devour or Void Overshields, it is going to allow us to generate a orb of power directly on us, which means that we don't have to go out and grab it. It automatically gets picked up the moment it's generated, which synergizes with Wavesplitter quite well. And the final thing to bring this build together is going to be Tablet of Ruin. On Tablet of Ruin, we have Volatile Marksman. Long story short, you land rapid crits or get rapid kills. It gives us volatile rounds. Volatile detonations will give us, I believe it's 10% class ability energy, allowing us to loop to Void Soul a lot easier. The next mod is going to be Unraveling Orbs to pair with any strand weapons that we might have. Our next mod is going to be Harsh Refractions, which reads, Trace Rifles do more damage to targets afflicted by elemental debuffs matching their element type. This is a 35% damage buff, and if you remembered what Supercharged Battery does, whenever you deal sustained damage using Wavesplitter, it is going to suppress them, which means that Wavesplitter on its own is able to self-proc Harsh Refractions, and Harsh Refractions stacks with every other buff in the game. Our next mod is going to be Horde Shuttle, again just to pair with Unraveling Orbs, allowing us to generate Threadlings whenever we deal damage to unraveled targets, and our Threadlings will sever them, which will help our survivability quite a bit. Our next mod is going to be Maligned Harvest, and what this will do is whenever we apply Weaken, it is going to give us a small Void Overshield, and whenever we rapidly apply Volatile, it is going to release a weakening burst. So what this means is Child of the Old Gods is not only going to be healing us because we're on Empowering Rift, but it is also going to be giving us a Void Overshield to help with sustain quite a bit. Our next mod is personal preference. I choose Limit Break. The other artifact mod that you can swap out for Limit Break is going to be 2 Shreds, as this is going to help survivability quite a bit if you're struggling on that front. Basically, whenever you kill a severed enemy, it is going to generate a Woven Mail hotspot similar to the Into the Fray aspect on Strand Titan. This is so unbelievably good. It works with Slice, it works with enemies that are severed by your Threadlings, so overall it is arguably the best artifact perk for survivability in the entire game. Now moving on to our last but most important artifact mod, Elemental Supercharger. What this will do is whenever we kill a exhausted or severed target with a weapon that matches our super, so Wavesplitter, is going to grant us bonus super energy. This is an additional 2% super energy on top of what we are already getting from Mantle Battle Harmony, and if you are paying close attention, you'll know that Wavesplitter is overload, which means that every single kill that you get with Wavesplitter is not only going to be proccing Mantle Battle Harmony's Super Gen, but it's also going to be proccing Elemental Supercharger, meaning that every kill we're getting around 3 to 4% super energy for simply using the gun that the build is built on. To give an example of how much super energy this is, I will simply show you. So pop my super, and as you can see in the super bar, we are getting a ridiculous amount of super energy off of just that wave of adds alone, which, by the way, we do get more super energy from Battle Harmony if the enemy rank is higher. When you are actively collecting the orbs from both the Vault of Glass set as well as attrition orbs and any other source of orb gen that you have, this is going to accelerate our super even further, which, speaking of, we'll go over to the armor mods. On the helmet, it's not the most important, but I have opted for special ammo finders, as this will help us sustain the Wavesplitter even more like a primary. That way we basically have infinite ammo with it. In the last slot, I have a harmonic siphon to allow multi-kills using Wavesplitter to give us an orb. On the gauntlets, again, not the most important. I just have 3 grenade fonts, as I don't really think firepower is needed, and none of the other mods really do anything for us. On Mantle Battle Harmony, I have a Void Ammo Generation, so that way our Wavesplitter goes from 80 ammo gen to 100, allowing us to get the maximum amount of gains that we can possibly get using Wavesplitter. On the boots, I have 2 weapon font mods. This is purely because I cannot get to 200 weapon stat. However, if you are able to, you can slot pretty much whatever you want here, followed by a harmonic scavenger to allow us to get even more ammo per brick for Wavesplitter. On the bond, again, more fonts. Who could have seen this coming? None of these mods really do anything for us, again, so I have opted to just go for class fonts, as this will bring up my class stat up from 50 to 90, which, speaking of stats, the stats that you want to focus is obviously going to be as much weapon stat as you can get, followed by as much super stat as you can get, followed by grenade, and then you dump the rest into class. In order to get the highest amount of weapons and super stat, you are going to need at least 2 to 3 powerhouse archetype pieces, and in order to get to 100 grenade, I would highly recommend going with Grenadier. However, if you want to opt for more class stat, you can do that and drop the grenade, since we're going to be picking that up through fonts, and the grenade isn't the most important part of our kit anyways. In regards to legendary weapons, I have opted to go for either an Eager Edge Sword. I tend to use Dragon Colt Sickle, as this is a caster frame that can roll with attrition orbs, or Refurbish if in the case that I need either better boss damage or the ability to snipe things from afar. And my kinetic slot is just a strand weapon with slice. The only one I have currently is Relentless from Prophecy. In regards to anti-champ stuff, I would highly recommend you have at least a unstopped primary, and a caster frame or refurbished are anti-barrier, and obviously wave splitter is going to be overload. So that way you have all 3 champion types covered. And with all that being said, that is going to be it for the video. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.